Dumelang, welcome to Face the Nation. My name is Clement Manyatela. Great to have you with us here on SABC News. On the show tonight, what is it going to take to deal decisively with gender-based violence in our communities? The country is still reeling from what happened to Olerato Mongale, a Wits University student whose body was dumped from a car this week. What needs to be done to assure the safety of women and children in our communities? The Justice Minister, Kubayi, will speak to us tonight on that and other issues. Also on the show, President Cyril Ramaphosa has signed a proclamation for the establishment of a judicial commission of inquiry to determine whether attempts were made to prevent the investigation and prosecution of Apartheid-era crimes. But some families of the victims have reservations. We'll speak to the Foundation of Human Rights, which has been representing some of those families. And then later, will the Nasi Ispani program last this time around? That's the question. The Premier has relaunched the program. He'll speak to us about it tonight. But first, my comment. So there are incidents that have happened this week that have reminded us once again of the crisis of gender-based violence. The Pretoria North Magistrates Court earlier today sentenced Johannes Kotzier to life imprisonment. Do you remember him? He is that 79-year-old man who was convicted of raping a 6-year-old girl. The 6-year-old referred to him as Opa, though they were not biologically related, but that tells you of the relationship that both enjoyed. Also earlier today, the Western Cape High Court sentenced Jocelyn Smith's mom and her accomplices to life behind bars. The trio was found guilty of kidnapping and human trafficking of the young girl. All of this is happening as the country is still reeling from what happened to Olerato Mongale, that Wits University student whose body was dumped from a car this week. This is someone who went out on a date and didn't make it back home. He said about the latest in this case.
Wednesday morning, our team made their way to Durban in KZN after following up on information that the suspects may be hiding in KwaMashu, where they originate from. So our investigation started on Sunday. We traced their steps. We landed at a lodge in Q in Johannesburg where 2 suspects had booked a room. And we now know that they booked the room, they paid for it, but they didn't sleep in that particular room on Sunday evening. So we have been tracing their steps. We know that after the incident, after allegedly murdering Olerato and dumping her body in Lombardy West, they then drove back to KwaZulu-Natal. So our team arrived yesterday afternoon in KwaMashu, where we identified one of the suspects' houses. We also went to the area of Phoenix at a panel beater workshop, where we recovered the VW Polo in question that we have been looking for.
And the community where the white VW Polo suspected in the murder was recovered was also left traumatized.
So CPF KwaMashu, since we get the news yesterday, we communicated through our channels to try to cascade information around this case. Finally, we got it earlier morning today. One suspect was arrested through that communication. And thank you for law enforcement agency for working swift to arrest one suspect. But again, as a community of KwaMashu, we're trying by all means to make our township or our area to be a crime-free zone.
And as you can imagine, the family has been left devastated.
This is going to take many years of healing, conversations, connecting, questioning, because even some of the scriptures that we quote for strength, especially for her mom, are scripts that would tell you that even in this situation, God is in it. And you ask yourself, what kind of God would allow for such a thing? Could it be that perhaps we've allowed the devil so much in our midst that we've normalized sending RIPs? And it truly is just so devastating for any parent to see their child in that state.
This case and the sentences today in court have reminded us of how unsafe women and children are in our societies. And these are the most vulnerable in our communities. They remind us of how unkind the world is to this vulnerable group. And I think we need to do better as a society. The question we're asking you tonight is, where do you think we are failing the survivors and victims of gender-based violence and abuse? What else do we need to do to demonstrate that we appreciate that this gender-based violence is a crisis? I mean, legislation is being worked on. There are awareness campaigns. Arrests are happening in some cases. But the murders, the violence, and the abuse continues. Please share your thoughts with us by sending us a WhatsApp voice note on 078-459-1897. Remember to tell us your name and your surname and where you're sending the voice note from. And please keep them at 30 seconds. Alternatively, you can send us an X on @FaceTheNation SABC. After the break, we'll start that conversation with the Minister of Justice, Mamuluko Kubayi. Stay with us. Welcome back. The National Prosecuting Authority has welcomed the sentencing of the 3 convicted people in the case of the disappearance of the then 6-year-old Jocelyn Smith. Steveno van Rijn, Jacques Apollis, and the child's mother, Kelly Smith, have each been sentenced to life imprisonment on charges of human trafficking and 10 years on charges of kidnapping. We're now joined by the Minister of Justice and Constitutional Development, Mamuluko Kubayi. Minister, thank you so much for making time for us. Good evening.
Good evening to you, Clement, and to your viewers at home.
Let's just start maybe with the case of Olerato Mongales. I mean, the alleged killers, we're told they were out on bail at the time of this attack. And I suppose when people hear that, they continue to have a distrust in the justice system, and you can't really blame them, can you?
Look, there are issues where, as we say, we have laws that still govern how we do things. You'd find that they did, in terms of the law, have qualified for parole. And I can say, you'd remember, Clement, as the justice cluster, we have agreed that we are going to review our processes. We are going to look at where the gaps are. Today, fortunately, we had a justice cluster meeting this morning, crime and justice cluster, what we call JCPS. One of the items was to look at the parole. How far are we in terms of reviewing the parole and also the Criminal Procedure Act that we are responsible for? So both the Department of Correctional Services and Department of Justice having to review that. There are interim measures that the Minister has committed that is going to put in place to assist in terms of responding to this, where there's high crimes, where people have been able to commit murder so that they are not found in our system. The challenge that we have, you do have human rights organizations that will continue to say when an offender has done, we've got to be able to say there are corrective measures. And it's a conversation that we must continue as society to be able to look at how do we protect society without compromising them, while we are not offending or even continue to suppress other people's rights. I think that's a balance that we need to find. But the killings are too much. The story of the young woman, Lorato, I mean, it's just too painful to see. The family is expecting a young woman to complete university and come and make a meaningful impact in their life, and that is not happening. So there are quite a number of this. And daily we are hearing of women, and that's why we started this process together as the co-chairperson with Minister Mtuli. And I can say this, we are starting even to monitor weekly what is happening from a point of police, where an incident has happened, the response time, but also from even the NPA side in terms of prosecution. You'll see that the spokesperson has been going out in terms of NPA, communicating the cases that are there. so that we rebuild confidence by action in society. But in cases of rape and sexual offences, Clement, one case that is acquitted in court, one case of somebody not arrested, one case of somebody not being found, it's one too many, because it's a motive matter.
Yeah, because we still have these the alarming surge in these gender-based violence and femicide incidents across the country. Have you been able, though, as a department, have you been able to fast-track the implementation of the National Strategic Plan on gender-based violence?
And that is led by the Minister of Women, Youth and Persons with Disability. We have re-established the IMC from cabinet point of view. The President has done that. It's co-chaired with the Minister of Social Development. We will have a roundtable discussion led by Social Development with all the NGOs that have done the marches, that have submitted their grievances, so that we can give them feedback in terms of how far we've gone. From my side as Minister of Justice, for example, one of the things that we can report, for example, in this 5 days, actually within 6 days, you'd see, if you go to even the social media of NPA, you'd see it's the Jocelyn case that we've been able to see the NPA secured a sentencing with the life sentencing. Pastor Albert Tamasen, who raped a minor, has received a life within this 5 days. We've got Avela Bushula, who has been sentenced 22 years, who actually killed his wife and a 2-month-old baby. We've got a Papi Morekele as well, jailed for life for raping a mentally ill young person. We've got Brown in Links, jailed for 20 years, raping his sister. So we are monitoring now this case as they go to court. And I want to appreciate it, especially on the Jocelyn case. If you can see there, the judge took initiative to understand the impact of this case on communities and brought the case to the community, made the sitting of the court in the community so that communities can follow, but more so, ensure that, because it's a matter that does not affect one family, it's a matter that affects society. And this is what we appreciate about some of this. And it couldn't have been sending a better message in the week where we're saying it's a Child Protection Week in South Africa and the world. So it's something that we are paying attention to. We are supporting the work that is being done by law enforcement agencies, but we are monitoring from the side of ministers to ensure that we can communicate, but where there are weaknesses, we are able to intervene.
Yeah, and let's hope those sentences do send a strong message. On another matter, Minister, the President has now signed a proclamation for the establishment of a Judicial Commission of Inquiry to determine whether attempts were made to prevent the investigation and prosecution of Apartheid-era crimes. What has the Commission been given the authority to investigate here?
Here we've got, if you remember, the matter that we call now Galat and others versus the government, where the President, myself as Minister of Justice and Minister of Police, NPA are cited, where they've raised a concern that there's been delay in prosecution of apartheid crimes, and they do believe that there's been interference by the state blocking NPA from doing this. So we have argued as the state that there's not been interference, and we've explained that there's been difficulties, but if indeed there are, they should be investigated. And if there are individuals who've done that, they should be brought to book, because it shouldn't be, NPA should not be stopped from doing its work. There must not be interference. And that's why we would have agreed as government, together with the litigants, to say we agree with them in their request of setting up a commission of inquiry that will investigate indeed if this is done, because we've been arguing that it has not been done. They are arguing that it has been done. So we're saying the commission of inquiry will do. We are working around the clock together. As you know, the President has now announced the lead team, the commissioner and the chair of the commission, Judge Khampepe, who will lead the inquiry, which we are expecting to start within the month of July. And we don't expect them to be too long, but to look at those who are coming forward to say this is the evidence that we are bringing, that if they say Mamoloko Kubayi, as Minister of Justice, has stopped prosecution, Mamoloko must be given an opportunity to explain whether indeed has in her action stopped prosecution of apartheid cases in that context, because we do feel that this will allow, if anyone is cited, anyone is implicated, to explain for themselves. One of the issues that they are raising, which we said the commission will look into, is in terms of constitutional damage. We said you can't determine to say there are constitutional damage when you have not said and agreed that actually there's been blocking of those inquests or those prosecution. As we know, quite a number of inquests have started. As we can say now, the Craddock 4 inquest is starting next week on Monday, actually, and quite a number have been happening. The COSAS 4 have been happening, and quite a number in the Northwest, even in KZN. When we look at the Griffith inquest, you look at Chief Albert Luthuli inquest. So there are quite a number of them that we are looking at. Again, another angle, Clement, is that people are saying, is this worth it? Are you not wasting government money? And I always say there's no price for justice. There are people and their families who are asking for answers to know what has happened to their loved ones so that they can find closure. And that's why you see broadly, beyond the work that we do of TRC, is reparations, is reburials. This Saturday there's a reburial in Matatiele that the DM will lead as part of handing over the body of a person who has been killed in the gallows, and the family never had a chance to have closure. So it's part of those, as part of assisting the families to find closure.
Yeah, and of course, Minister, justice delayed is also justice denied. Why has it taken government so long to take this matter so seriously to a point where an inquiry is established? I mean, the former commissioners of the TRC have written to the president a couple of years ago to say, what's going on? So these matters have been raised before by even the families, that we are concerned that there's no movement in as far as prosecutions are concerned. And government is only establishing this inquiry now.
No, Clement, I think the reasons are different. As I asked and I looked at the matters, as I say, you would look at various processes that you would have envisaged. If you look at the report of the TRC, we'll have different phases of what needs to be done. Yes, it could be that we expected that certain things must happen at that time and would not have happened. The payments of families as part of reparations would have been done. The issue of identifying who has been responsible, and from the prosecution side, there is an explanation in terms of the delay, which will be explained in terms of the commission, why it took the investigation. I mean, some of the cases that they've shown, they say to us, we've investigated here, and we've literally found that there was nothing. We couldn't reconstruct the scene. We couldn't reconstruct the case. We couldn't find any witnesses. And some of them have been closed. So they will show you in terms of the commission that in this year, this is work that has been done. In this year, this is work that has been done. I think what has been backed, and which is people have been saying, and we are trying now, and that's why I took the initiative as the minister to communicate now, is that over time, even my predecessors were not communicating the work that they are doing. If we look at the reburials, for example, when we did the reburials of Bomoloise and Benjamin in Soweto, people were asking, oh, you are only fighting. I said, no, actually, I am concluding because I don't even have 10 more bodies to hand over or remains to hand over to the families, because the work has been done over years, but the communication of this work has not been as effective as it should be.
This inquiry has just about, 6 months to complete its work. Is that sufficient?
From where we are sitting, we do believe, and will monitor. We think that people have raised concerns about commissions that take forever and literally take a lot of money out of the state. Remember, with the commissions as well, you're going to have to try and see if there's support that you need to give to the families who are coming forth and all those things. So you can't want to have it open-ended. That does not have a time frame to end. Otherwise, then we'll actually end up with the criticism again of just almost like a soapy that people are just sitting and watching. We want this to be concluded so that we can be able to continue with the implementation. If indeed there are issues that we must pay attention to, we have time within the space to be able to pay attention to.
So my understanding is that as government, you are seeking a stay of the court application brought by the families pending the conclusion and outcomes of this commission. Is this a fair request, considering the weight these families have gone through already?
Look, the issue here is that we can't have, because the issue of the Commission of Inquiry is their request. Now we are saying We agree with the Commission of Inquiry so that we can determine the damages. Now, part of their prayers is around constitutional damage. And we are saying, let the Commission be the one that says to us, yes, there's damage to the families, and this is the value of the damage. And because the family said commissions don't have the issue of authority, and then we acknowledge that, okay, what we will do, whatever comes as a report of the commission, that's what we are saying. The court must stay, it must not be withdrawn, it can continue. We are rejoining the court so that where there are issues that we must be able to look at. Because it's not fair to say that you want to prosecute Mamoloko, but you do not want Mamoloko to defend themselves. So we don't think that is natural justice that would be applied. So that's why we've asked for the state to say, allow the commission can do the work for 6 months while we are applying for stay. Once the 6 months is done, then we can go back to court and report to court to say, as we have promised, the commission has done its work, the commission has concluded, this is the report that the commission has produced, this is our implementation and timeframes of it.
Yeah. Let me also get your thoughts on what Advocate Paul Pretorius told us when he was on this show on Face the Nation. He said that since the last time that there was a request made to your department for his contract to be renewed, he hasn't had anything, basically. And he said it's been about 7 months. And he said you can make up your own conclusions, quote unquote. And he also says that he wasn't conflicted when he was in the NPA. I know you responded to what I had tweeted at the time about what he said. Can you please clarify that for us? Because it appears like from what he said that his name was submitted to you at some point, but from your response, the suggestion I got was that that's not really the case.
I think firstly, I must say it's unethical of Advocate Pretorius to have done what he has done. Currently, if we are to speak legally, when you apply for a job, you can't dictate to a potential employer how they must deal with your matter. First for me was that, how did he know that there's a process? Who told me? Because I don't have a process, as I said, Clement. I arrived in the department in December. I met with the team. I was told that there was a historic issue of Section 38 appointees who were delayed. I asked, okay, what was the problem? And they said, no, there was a query around the costs. I said, what is your guidelines in terms of appointment of Section 38? I was told there's no guidelines. We committed, I said, go draft guidelines. I will approve them so that we work within that framework. Within a month, the guidelines were developed. Within a month, the guidelines were approved by me, which was January this year. In March this year, I received an application for 2 applications of advocates to be approved within the guidelines, and the name of Advocate Pretorius was not in the 2 names. Since I've been here, those are the only 2 names that have been submitted to me as Minister of Justice and Constitutional Development for approval. I do not know what Advocate Pretorius is talking about as Minister of Justice, Mamoloko Kubayi.
So to be clear then, Minister, there was no application sent by the NPA for the renewal of the contract for Advocate Paul Pretorius. That's not what's on your desk.
Not to me. When I arrived on the portfolio, remember, Clement, when you renew a contract, the contract must still be active. When I arrived on the portfolio, Advocate Pretorius was no longer active in NPA. Therefore, they could not be, if they are to request a contract for Advocate Pretorius, it will be a new contract, which NPA will have to apply, utilizing Section 38 and the guidelines that they have in front of them.
Okay.
And one of the issues I've emphasized is that if it's a reappointment, a person who's been there, I request performance appraisal. They should have done a performance, all of us when we were. If we are to be appointed again on a position when we had a contract, it means that we have done well, our contract would have been appraised, would have performed well, and that must be part of the approval process. As I say, I do not have that in front of me. Okay. I've never had, as Mamuluku Kubayi, an application for Advocate Pretorius to be appointed in NPA as Section 38. It's a fact.
Mamuluku Kubayi, the Justice Minister, thank you so much for joining us on Face the Nation tonight. We'll be back after the break. Welcome back. So we've been asking you the question this evening on Face the Nation about where you think we are failing the survivors and victims of gender-based violence and abuse. And by we, I mean as society, government as well. Where are we failing them? Because there's awareness, there's some arrests happening, legislation is being worked on, but these cases are still so brutal. Some of you have sent us your responses via X. Sikhwate says, good evening, Tobela. To all our viewers out there, I think criminals are given a lot of rights than victims. Our country must implement harsher punishment to perpetrators because our kids, sisters, and mothers are no longer safe. Dennis says the state should enforce laws that protect victims of domestic violence and child abuse, to include whistleblowers. Tusang says our judiciary needs a total overhaul. Bail conditions should be more strict. Our judiciary is failing the work that the police do and let criminals walk out of the courts willy-nilly. Where do you think we're failing the victims and survivors? You can also send us a tweet or you can send us a WhatsApp voice note. Let's move to this now. Some families of the victims of Apartheid-era crimes have reservations about the establishment of the TRC, that inquiry by the President. The commission was established after a court case brought by the families of the victims against the government and President Cyril Ramaphosa in January. There's now a commission of inquiry that's been established that's going to be looking at why there have been delays or the lack of prosecutions. Has there been political interference? We're now joined by Kimmie, who's the Executive Director at the Foundation for Human Rights. Thank you so much for making time for us, Zaid. Good evening.
Good evening. Happy to be here.
Let's start with your reaction, perhaps, to the terms of reference that were announced by the President. This commission has now been established. We now see what looks to be the scope of the investigation. Are you hopeful that we'll get to the bottom of the truth?
Well, we welcome the establishment of the Commission of Inquiry. As you mentioned in your interview with the Minister of Justice, there's been a long-standing call for many, many years. I think at least 7 or 8 years that the call has been for a Commission of Inquiry. And it's unfortunate that the President has only established the commission after the families went to court and forced his hand. So this, I think one thing would be fair to say, this wasn't some magnanimous gesture on the part of the state. This was a result of the action taken by the families. Nevertheless, we welcome the Commission of Inquiry, and we hope that in the first instance it will take a hard look at the question of why these prosecutions and investigations didn't take place and who was responsible, if any, for interfering with the NPA processes. We do not agree with the remaining terms of the Commission. We do not agree that it should make any declaration on whether the rights of the families have been violated. I think we believe that is self-evident, and we do not believe the Commission of Inquiry should concern itself with the question of constitutional damages. And therefore we are pursuing with court action with regard to those two components.
Speaking of that court action, the President says he respects the decision of the families to seek a court order on the violation of their rights and constitutional damages through the courts. But what he's asking for is for them to stay their application pending the conclusion and outcomes of this Commission of Inquiry. And as you heard, I asked the Minister if this is a fair ask, given how long these families have waited for justice.
No, we don't think it's fair. We think that those issues can be settled by a court right now. The question of whether the family's rights have been violated, I think that, to me, is self-evident. It's not a question, as the Minister tried to insinuate that there has been progress recently. We're not concerned about the recent progress. That's another matter. We're concerned about the almost 20 years where no progress happened. We're concerned about the cases that are now no longer viable, where the perpetrators have died, where no one has been taken to court, where no justice has been served. It's those cases we're concerned about. The fact that there are cases now, like the COSAS 4, that are in court, that is great, but that could have happened 15 to 20 years ago. And there are other cases where that could have happened as well, and it didn't. And now there's no longer any prospect of a criminal prosecution. It's not enough to say that the Craddock 4 inquest is starting next Monday. The Craddock 4 inquest is taking place because for decades the perpetrators walked free. And they should have been and could have been prosecuted many, many years ago. Now we have an inquest because all of the perpetrators have died. And so it's not some achievement to say we will now have an inquest. It's a component of the state's failure towards these families, that we have an inquest and that the opportunities for actual criminal prosecutions have passed us by.
Yeah. What do the families think is a reason for the delays, Zayed? Because it just doesn't make sense that 30 years into our democracy, over 30 years, we still are looking at cases that have not been successfully prosecuted, many of them. I mean, the cases from the TRC. The former TRC commissioners at some point had to write letters to the president to ask questions, what's going on? We need your help. What do they think is going on here? Because it's just not making sense.
I think we can say with some certainty that none of the family members believe that this was just happenstance, that this was just circumstantial. That was the cases were too difficult, or the NPA had too much other work to do. I think we can say very clearly this was a systemic failure to investigate and prosecute. As to who was responsible and why they made those decisions, I think we have sufficient circumstantial evidence to suggest that these were political decisions. But the fact is we don't know the story. That's what the Commission of Inquiry should focus on. It should focus on identifying who gave the orders and who followed the orders. And in doing so, both of those parties would have broken the law. And then, hopefully, we will fight for prosecutions of anyone who's been identified as having broken the law. That's what we need.
Do you think the politicians will want to go and testify at the Commission? You may have seen some of them have already started indicating that they don't want to.
Well, we'll have to see. The Commission can, I believe, subpoena witnesses, and we'll have to see. I think in as far as President Mbeki and former Minister of Justice Mabandla, they've been quite eager to claim that their reputations have been tarnished by some of these allegations, and the Commission of Inquiry provides a perfect opportunity for them to clear their name, to come and say what they knew and what they did, and to put that up for public scrutiny. That's what a Commission of Inquiry is meant to do, and meant to uncover these facts. I think it would be unfair to say to the families now, you must prove that there was some form of political interference, or in fact identify who was responsible for that political interference, or identify exactly how it worked. We already know that there was a systemic failure to prosecute, and that systemic failure has damaged the family's rights. That's not in dispute. No one is claiming that that the family's rights haven't been violated. It's just a mistake or happenstance that prosecutions didn't happen. I think anyone peddling that story, needs to sober up.
Zayed Kimmie, thank you so much for making time for us on Face the Nation tonight. After the break, the Premier of Gauteng, Panyaza Lesufi, joins us. Stay with us. Welcome back. Gauteng Premier Panyaza Lesufi has relaunched the Nasi Ispani program. The Premier revealed that the second installment will recruit youth across the province with the aim to create about 40,000 jobs The program has, however, received criticism from opposition parties. The DA before has called it a political gimmick. Lesufi has also announced last week moves to axe several department heads after lifestyle audits findings. The Premier joins us now in studio. Thank you so much for making time for us, Premier.
Thank you so much, Madimesh. Are you well, Madimesh?
I'm good.
Thank you.
Let's start with you reviving the Nasi Ispani jobs program. Let's start with what had happened to the initial program. Why was it stopped?
It was not stopped. It ran its life because it was contract, and the contract expired, and we're trying to bring a new. What we have now is a different one, actually. That is why I don't understand the halabaloo, because we've learned from the previous one. We have young people that are unemployed, or we've got many people that are unemployed. We've got falling infrastructure. Either a school does not have a roof, it's falling ceiling, we've got potholes, we've got traffic lights that we have. So what we are bringing now, it's a skills-based program where we'll train people, bricklaying, electrician, using technical school, TVET colleges, that will train them. And we will deploy them to go and fix the falling infrastructure. Everyone agrees that we've got a good province, developing province with good infrastructure, but the infrastructure that is completely falling. You go to community halls, you go to graveyards, you find just a mere fence has fallen. Grass is not cut. You go to some areas where sewer is flowing freely because the plumbing has not been perfect. So we are saying you can't have young people that are unemployed, but at the same time you have these challenges. If you train them, you will solve these challenges, and they will get not only the skill, but something that will allow them to also have their own livelihood updated. So that's the program, and I don't understand the noise, the halabaloo, but we know why, because their polling has indicated to them that the previous campaign or the previous initiative has contributed to the development of young people, and therefore they don't want that. They want young people to remain at home unemployed.
Is there money for this program this time
around?
It's
a combination. Yes, we have never had struggle for money. I mean, you'll be the first one to know that we even almost returned some resources back to Treasury. So it's never been a problem of money. What we had is that it was a contract that came to an end. Now we have worked with various institutions, the tertiary institutions. We're working with schools. We're also working with national government. 32,000 teacher assistants are going to be announced, and this is funding that is coming from national government. We are working on our own funding on areas where we believe that we can pay teachers that are going to train these young people to get the skills that are alluded to. Can be welding, can be tiling, because these are the things that we don't have in our schools, where schools are falling. We find that the school just needs repainting. It's been there for 52 years. There's never been repainted. But if you train those young people to go and repaint that school, we really believe that it's a program that can improve the lives of our young people.
Have you quantified how much the initial program cost to you as the department?
The last Nasi Ispani was well over 200 million. And we have changed the lives of almost 70,000 young people that were sitting at home doing nothing. So it has been a huge success, and that is why majority of them now have got jobs in other institutions. When you meet them, they say that because of this program, I developed this skill, and now I can work in some government departments.
Yeah, and I remember, as you said, one of the criticism from other political parties was that these people are brought into the program, but then at some point contracts get, the contract ends, and then they have to now go fend for themselves. Was the purpose to at least start with skills development, train people, give them some experience, but not to necessarily have them permanently?
That is why we say this time we've learned from those accusations, we've learned from those limitations. But if you give somebody a skill as a bricklayer, if you give somebody a skill as a welder, you give somebody a skill as an electrician, or somebody that can assist us with solar panels and other things, there's a skill that they can utilize beyond the contract. They can be in a position to look for opportunities. But we are also trying as government to say we need to minimize this contracting, tendering system. If we can utilize this army of skilled people to do the basics, it will also have a long livelihood. But also other provinces and other institutions may want their skills as well when they have to improve their either campuses or they have to improve their facilities. So to us, we really believe it's a big investment. But it's more on a skills development, but obviously with a stipend that will allow them to survive as well.
As you can imagine, there are probably people watching us now thinking, how do I apply? When does the application
open? We're
open?
launching it in June. We're still finalizing it. When I leave here, I'm meeting with the Minister of Labour. There are one or two things that we need to conclude. We are also going to meet with the Minister of Higher Education for the Skills Fund. We are also meeting with TVET colleges. What we need to do, because you can't have academic institution lying idle. Now schools or universities are closing after the exams, whereas we've got young people that can come and use the lecture rooms during that period. Schools are closing, especially technical schools. You can't allow them to lie idle, because those technical schools, they can accommodate these people that are employed to be trained for a limited period. So it's a massive, massive program that the team is finalizing. It's just unfortunate that you are accountable to Parliament or legislature. When you outline these things, the opposition will take it out and explain it the way they explain it. But we'll launch it officially, and then we'll share all the relevant details with you. But I'm excited about it. I really believe that it's skills revolution that will allow young people or anyone that is unemployed to be empowered with a skill, to get a stipend, but at the same time solve social problems. You can't have so many potholes when young people can come and assist us with that. You can't have people on the waiting list when people can conclude unfinished RTP houses and many other programs that or projects that we really believe can be resolved by these skills that we are bringing.
Yeah, let's talk about the issue of some of the department heads that have failed a series of lifestyle audits. What's the update on that?
Well, there were only 4 amongst the 13 that went for lifestyle audits, and when they failed, the SIU, we requested the SIU to deal with this particular task. They requested them to resubmit information that was outstanding, for example, the properties they own, the trust, and many other things. Of the 4, it's only 2 now that are outstanding, and there's 1 that have submitted the relevant information. So we're waiting for SIU to conclude on that particular task. But we are proud that we've done that. We are the only province that have done that. Obviously, being the only one that lead in the fight of corruption, the focus will be on you, because we are doing it. Others are scared to do it, or they don't want to do it, or they're afraid of doing it. And now that we know the status of not only the HODs, myself as a premier and all the MECs went on this lifestyle audit. Now we are doing those that are dealing with tenders, and we'll have an overall picture of the people that are running government, whether indeed these are people that are of ethical standing. And when they conclude all those things, we'll be in a position to make pronouncement. I've interviewed all the HODs, and I've indicated my displeasure on areas that I really believe they've let us down. And I've also met with all the MECs to indicate that I'm about to make drastic changes on the caliber of the HODs that we have, but also the caliber of managers that are running government.
Have the results come out for you and the other MECs?
Yeah, they've come out.
All of you have passed?
No. The 3 that are still outstanding, because we appointed them in this term. So when they come back, then we'll be in a position to release the results.
That's the MECs?
Yeah, that's the MECs.
Okay, but yours is out, it's fine?
Done.
2
years ago.
Okay. When we say that they have failed lifestyle audits, what does that mean exactly?
They are high risk. They're high risk.
Okay.
There's undeclared information. That lifestyle audit is very invasive, to be quite frank. But it's needed. Because we need to know and to be sure that we're not hiding some assets. We need to show that we're living within our means, and we need to show that we're not captured by other people, because there might be businesses that are controlling your life or controlling your decisions. So it's on the basis of that. So when the last 2 are finalized, then I'm dead sure that we'll be in a position to take action. And when the 3 MECs are finalized as well, we'll know that as the senior leadership of government, whether we are on the right path or not.
Yeah. You mentioned that 4 out of the 12 are the ones that went to do the lifestyle audit?
No, they went for a repeat. They did it, and the 4, unfortunately, were of high risk.
Okay,
and then they have to go to a next stage where they have to provide additional information.
Yeah.
So the 2 were cleared. It's only 2 that are their report is still outstanding, because they've just submitted the information to the SIU.
Yeah. Let's also get an update on, there was a report about the spending of 34 million rand a month on office rental spaces. I know you launched a probe the last time to uncover whether there could be irregularities or irregular practices. Why is government spending so much money on renting buildings?
It's just a historic something that needed to be finalized and reversed, and unfortunately, we're overtaken by events. Let me give context. When Gauteng was established as government, the head office of Gauteng was in Tshwane. So all these buildings were in Tshwane, 21 of them to be exact, were in Tshwane. But the decision was taken that head office is in Johannesburg, which simply means those buildings needed to be left and people come to Johannesburg. And when they came to Johannesburg, they bought various buildings to have what we call a government prison. So during that process, there was what I can say, a private-public partnership, a call for how best can we utilize these offices, the one that are in Tshwane and the one that is here. That process prolonged. While we were still dealing with that process, people were, you have to work somewhere, and there's expansion of offices. And that's the reason why these offices were hired. And within that context, we've already appointed a legal firm just to check whether it's value for money. You might find that indeed the 34 million is value for money or not, and we will be in a position to attend to it. But the properties belongs to the state, and there was a process, and that process was abandoned purely because those that applied for the private-public partnership either didn't qualify or didn't meet the criteria, and that necessitated that in the interim, government offices, obviously people must work in their offices.
So how many offices are vacant right now as we speak?
In Tshwane is around 21, I think in Johannesburg is 14.
And how long have they been vacant for?
For quite some time. As I said, when the decision to migrate government from that area to come to Johannesburg, that's, long before some of us became members of the executive.
Jeez, so the previous premiers have never wanted to look at this and do an inquiry?
Well, maybe we've heard of something called Kopanong Precinct. It has been an on and off project where you say, let all government offices be in Johannesburg. Let all departments work from Johannesburg and create a precinct where you can get this thing, where you can get access to services. But when they went to the private sector to partner with them on this thing, it has been on and off, and it has created the quagmire.
And they could have hired out the offices?
Well, they're not in a state where...
Oh, they still need to be refurbished.
Yeah, they need, the Department of Labour is not even giving them the go-ahead, so there are lots of problems with that. But I think the investigation will give us a guide, but we are restarting that process now. Fortunately, you were there. We've been given 84 billion rands to revitalize the Johannesburg CBD. That's the money that is going to be utilized to refurbish and reposition these offices that we're talking about.
You said earlier that there was money that was sent back to National Treasury. Yeah. There's so much need in Gauteng to respond to service delivery.
Regrettable.
Why is money being sent back to Treasury?
Well, I've been working on this matter for quite some time, Madi Major. In the last 5 years, it was hovering around 5 billion. In the last 2 years, it was 3 billion. This is the smallest amount of money, but it's still a lot of money. Fortunately, because of the delay of the budget adoption in Parliament, we made the representation of the 1.8 billion that we were supposed to return, and at least 1.4 billion has been given to us, to the departments that could not utilize. This is either because the posts were not filled, the infrastructure has still been built, the invoices arrived late. So of the 1.8, 1.4 is a rollover. We only surrendered 358 million. It's still too much, but if you check where it comes from 5 billion, we've managed it until 358 million. And the team and some of the HODs in the sessions that I had, that we have regarded as misconduct, and they have to go through the necessary disciplinary processes, because you can't have people dying and because of either the state of a hospital, because of cancer machines and many other things, and you have the luxury to return almost 358 million. It's just unacceptable. And as I said, I met all the MECs, I met all the HODs, and those that are responsible, they know that something is waiting for them. Yeah. Okay.
As we wrap up, let me ask you to put on your ANC leader's hat and ask you about... it's a virtual one. There was a report that you are planning to quit politics.
I think it was a misrepresentation, to be quite frank. I was asked, will you contest in 2027? I said, don't pigeonhole me to politics. There are many other things that I can do. I mean, 2027 is still far. And out of that, I think a journalist felt that I'm saying I'm throwing the towel. But you know, the issue of 2027 is something that we've agreed to shelve, but we'll discuss it at the right moment. But where I am, I'm still available for a movement. I'm still available for government. Wherever that they feel best to either deploy me or locate me, I'll be the first one to appreciate.
All right. Premier Panyaza Lesufi, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you so much. Thanks, Madam Chair. Truly appreciate it.
We're going to wrap up now with some of the WhatsApp voice notes that came through responding to the question we've been asking you tonight about where we are failing the victims and survivors of gender-based violence. Take a listen.
Good evening, Clement and the viewers. This is Ntobe Gwenumcholo. I think the best thing that should be done to deal with these cases against women, these perpetrators or criminals, they should face harsher consequences. The reason they carry on doing these things, it's because they know that the consequences are really not harsh. It's something that they can deal with. It's something that they can manage. So if the consequences are harsh, I'm sure people will step back. They will refrain from hurting women. Thank you.
Short Clement, I think the death penalty must be imposed at the maximum sentence for every perpetrator who has committed heinous crimes. People are going to court admitting that, yes, they are guilty of heinous crimes, yet they are being given life in prison, able to enjoy all the perks, PlayStations and the likes. So we cannot afford that. The government must come with an effective measure, and that measure is to ensure that there's a death penalty that is going to be imposed for any heinous crime. Maximum sentence, not for every murder, but for the most heinous of crimes. Kujo in Limpopo.
Good evening, Clement. We've been talking about stricter laws around GBV perpetrators, and yet nothing has been done. You'll find that offenders are walking the streets. When will these laws implement? When are we going to actively work hard at stopping gender-based violence in this country?
Yeah, we often talk about how it is a crisis, but how we're responding, and just some of the processes are just so slow, even with the implementation of revised legislation. Thank you for watching the Thursday edition of Face the Nation. We'll be back with you on Tuesday next week at 8 p.m. Have a good evening. Cheers.